Welcome to Truthful Crime. In today's episode, we visit the quiet town of Sedona, Arizona, known for its peaceful atmosphere and reputation as a place of healing. But this story takes a darker turn as we delve into the life of a teenage groom, his 65-year-old demanding bride, and a marriage that ended in tragedy. Juan Giles was a reserved 19-year-old from the small town of Cottonwood, Arizona. Having just graduated high school, he was well known for his quiet nature and could often be seen with a guitar slung over his shoulder. Despite his shy demeanor, music was his true passion, something that set him apart among his peers. Juan lived with his mother, Arlene Giles, in a modest trailer on the edge of town. Their financial situation had always been tough, but it worsened after Arlene lost her job during the economic downturn caused by the pandemic. As a single mother, she had struggled for years to provide for Juan, and now, more than ever, they were barely scraping by. The burden of their financial struggles weighed heavily on Juan, and he felt a deep responsibility to support his mother, who was drowning in debt. Though quiet, Juan was known for his kind heart and his willingness to help others, even when he had little to give. In the days leading up to his death, however, Juan found himself entangled in an increasingly bizarre and unsettling situation. Just a week before his death, Juan had married 65-year-old Gertrude Hartford, a wealthy retiree known for her extravagant lifestyle and multiple previous marriages. Despite their stark age difference, Gertrude insisted on a lavish wedding, which was held at a luxury resort in Sedona, complete with all the opulence she was accustomed to. At the ceremony, Juan appeared noticeably out of place, looking anxious and unsure of himself. His sudden marriage to the much older Gertrude Hartford shocked those who knew him, as it seemed completely out of character for the shy, reserved young man they were familiar with. His discomfort at the event raised eyebrows and left many wondering what had led him to such an unexpected decision. People couldn't help but question what had driven the quiet, introverted Juan to make such a drastic choice. Some speculated that he was motivated by his mother's financial struggles, while others worried that he was being manipulated. His relationship with Gertrude Hartford was unusual not just because of their significant age gap, but also because of J.Y.'s notoriously demanding and controlling personality. This added to the growing concern that Juan may have been pressured into something far beyond his control. Gertrude was notorious for throwing tantrums when things didn't go her way, and her behavior left Juan feeling more and more overwhelmed. He confided in his mother about his doubts and growing fears, but Arlene, desperate to escape their financial hardship, urged him to stay in the marriage. This left Juan feeling trapped, torn between his mother's wishes and his own discomfort with the life he had unwillingly stepped into. By the time of his death, Juan was still grappling with the drastic changes in his life. He had pulled away from his friends, spending most of his days isolated in his new home with Gertrude. His once bright dream of becoming a musician now felt out of reach. Juan, a young man full of potential, had lost his sense of direction, unable to see a future that made any sense to him. His life had taken a turn he never anticipated, and he struggled to find a way out. On the morning of October 8, 2021, the peaceful town of Sedona was shaken by a grim discovery. At 8:30 a.m., while out for her daily walk, Marjorie Lane noticed something unusual at the lavish home of Gertrude Hartford Giles. The curtains were drawn, and the front door was slightly ajar, piquing her curiosity and concern. Having lived in the neighborhood for over 30 years, Marjorie found this situation unusual, especially given Gertrude's reputation for her strict routine and meticulousness. Concerned, she decided to investigate. As she approached the house, she called out, but received no response. Hesitant but concerned, Marjorie stepped inside and was immediately overwhelmed by a strong, acrid odor. In the living room, she found Juan Giles lying motionless on the floor. His body was slumped against the couch, and several empty prescription pill bottles were scattered around him. A half-empty glass of water rested on the coffee table beside him. Marjorie stood frozen in shock, her heart racing. She knew Juan and struggled to grasp the reality of the scene before her. Fighting back tears, Marjorie hurriedly pulled out her phone and dialed 911, her hands shaking as she provided the operator with the address and details of the scene. When asked to check for signs of life, she hesitated but complied. Kneeling beside Juan, she gently shook his shoulder and called out his name, hoping for any sign of response. There was no response. Juan's face was pale, his lips slightly blue, and his breathing had ceased. The police arrived at the Hartford Giles residence just before 9 a.m. on October 8, 2021. The investigation was led by Detective Marla Grundle, a seasoned investigator with the Sedona Police Department, known for her sharp instincts and no-nonsense approach. She swiftly assessed the scene, accompanied by Officer Tom Jenkins, a young but eager recruit. Together they entered the home, now the focal point of a tragic mystery. The living room, where Juan's body was found, was eerily quiet. Detective Grundle immediately observed the empty pill bottles scattered around Juan and the glass of water on the coffee table. She took note of the labels on the bottles' prescriptions for medications such as Xanax and OxyContin, drugs frequently associated with overdose cases. Detective Grundle instructed Officer Jenkins to begin photographing the scene while she called for a forensics team to dust for fingerprints and collect evidence. Shortly after, the coroner, Dr. Evelyn Ahn, arrived to examine the body. Dr. Ahn confirmed that Juan had likely died from an overdose. The quantity of drugs found was far beyond the recommended limit, indicating that this was clearly no accident. As the investigation progressed, Detective Grundle noticed a small detail: a wedding photo of Juan and Gertrude on the mantel. In the picture, Juan's expression was distant and his eyes were downcast, sharply contrasting with Gertrude's radiant smile. This subtle detail suggested that all was not well in their newlywed life. The forensics team meticulously collected the pill bottles, the glass of water, and other potential evidence. They also noted a faint scent of perfume lingering in the air: Chanel No. 5, a fragrance Detective Grundle recognized as Gertrude's signature. As the team finished their work, Detective Grundle's suspicion grew stronger that this incident was more than a simple overdose. The evidence increasingly suggested foul play, and the investigation was only beginning. As the probe into Juan Giles' death continued, the focus shifted to the most apparent suspect, Gertrude J.Y. Hartford Giles, Juan's 65-year-old wife. When Detective Marla Grundle and Officer Tom Jenkins arrived at J.Y.'s home later that afternoon, they found her lounging by the pool, just a short distance from where her husband had died. She was sipping a mimosa and flipping through the latest issue of Vogue. Despite the tragic circumstances, J.Y. appeared disturbingly calm. Dressed in a designer caftan and oversized sunglasses, she radiated an air of indifference that immediately drew Detective Grundle's attention. J.Y. greeted the officers with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. When questioned about the events leading up to Juan's death, she explained that she had gone to bed early the previous night, leaving Juan in the living room to play his computer games. She said that upon waking up and not finding him in bed, she had assumed he was simply sleeping on the couch. J.Y. expressed surprise and some sadness upon hearing of Juan's death, but her reaction was subdued, as if she were learning of the passing of a distant acquaintance. During the interrogation, her account remained consistent, but her lack of genuine emotion fueled suspicion. She was cooperative yet distant, responding with a rehearsed precision that made Detective Grundle question whether there was more to her story than she was revealing. When questioned about the pill bottles found at the scene, J.Y. explained that Juan had been struggling recently and had been prescribed medication to help him manage his issues. She claimed she was unaware of any risk of overdose and suggested that Juan might have taken more pills than prescribed in a moment of despair. Despite her composed demeanor, Detective Grundle observed several inconsistencies in J.Y.'s account. For one, J.Y. had stated that Juan was playing video games, but the TV was off when Marjorie Lane discovered the body. Moreover, the master bedroom bed was untouched, indicating that J.Y. might not have gone to bed at all. As Detective Grundle pressed further, it became increasingly evident that J.Y. was concealing something. Without concrete evidence, the police couldn't hold J.Y. Her alibi appeared solid, but her behavior left an unsettling sense of doubt. As the interrogation wrapped up, Detective Grundle couldn't shake the feeling that this polished and composed woman was more entangled in Juan's death than she was admitting. With Gertrude Hartford Giles still under scrutiny, the police shifted their focus to a second suspect, Arlene Giles, Juan's mother. Arlene had endured numerous hardships throughout her life, marked by a series of increasingly poor decisions. Struggling with overwhelming debt, Arlene had turned to selling prescription drugs on the black market, a secret she had managed to keep hidden from most, but not all. Detective Grundle was aware that Arlene's desperation might have led her to pressure Juan into his ill-fated marriage with Gertrude, seeing the union as a potential escape from her financial troubles. The notion that her son's marriage could provide a solution to her financial woes was too tempting for Arlene to resist. However, the cost of such desperation was becoming increasingly apparent. When the police brought Arlene in for questioning, she seemed frazzled and anxious. Dressed in faded jeans and a worn t-shirt, she presented a stark contrast to the polished image of Gertrude. Arlene's hands trembled as she lit a cigarette, a habit she had recently resumed, and her voice wavered while answering the detective's questions. She admitted to encouraging Juan to marry Gertrude, framing it as an opportunity he couldn't afford to miss. Arlene described the extravagant wedding at the Sedona resort, noting how Juan had appeared out of place amidst the luxury. Arlene claimed she wanted the best for her son and believed that Gertrude could offer both him and herself the financial stability they lacked. However, when the discussion turned to the drugs found at the scene, Arlene became defensive. She denied any knowledge of the large quantity of pills, insisting that Juan must have acquired them on his own from somewhere else. Detective Grundle remained unconvinced. Arlene's financial difficulties, her involvement in illegal drug sales, and her desperation to secure her future all suggested possible complicity. As the pressure mounted, Arlene's composure began to falter, intensifying the urgency of the investigation into Juan's tragic death. Arlene's responses grew increasingly erratic and contradictory. At one point, she claimed she hadn't seen Juan in days, but later admitted to visiting him the night before his death. Arlene's nervousness and inconsistent statements only heightened the police's suspicions. With both Gertrude Hartford Giles and Arlene Giles under scrutiny, the focus shifted to a third suspect, Harry Hartford, Gertrude's ex-husband. Harry was a wealthy real estate mogul known for his ruthlessness in both business and personal matters. Harry's latest venture was developing retirement communities across Arizona, a lucrative business that had further expanded his empire. His relationship with Gertrude had ended in a bitter divorce just months before her marriage to Juan. The timing of Juan's marriage to a significantly younger woman only fueled Harry's jealousy and lingering resentment, making him a key suspect in the investigation. Detective Marla Grundle and Officer Tom Jenkins decided to bring Harry in for questioning. When they arrived at his expansive estate, they found him in his home office, surrounded by legal documents and architectural blueprints. Harry greeted them with a firm handshake, his demeanor both confident and controlled. Unlike Arlene, who had been nervous and agitated, Harry was calm and composed, as if he had been anticipating their visit. During the interrogation, he was cooperative but provided carefully measured responses. He admitted to being angered by Gertrude's new marriage, describing it as a slap in my bleeping face. Harry denied any involvement in Juan's death. He explained that he had been focused on his business and had minimal contact with Gertrude or Juan since the divorce. When asked about his whereabouts on the night of Juan's death, Harry provided a solid alibi, stating he was at a business dinner in Phoenix with potential investors. Several high-profile attendees could confirm Harry's presence, making it difficult for the police to dispute his alibi. Despite his cooperation, Detective Grundle remained unsettled by Harry's demeanor. His calmness seemed almost too rehearsed, suggesting he might have prepared his responses in advance. The fact that Harry had been seen arguing with Gertrude just days before Juan's death intensified the suspicion. Witnesses reported a heated exchange between them at a local country club, which complicated the investigation and cast doubt on Harry's seemingly airtight alibi. Reports indicated that Harry had warned Gertrude she would regret their divorce. Although the police lacked sufficient evidence to arrest Harry, his potential motives, jealousy and revenge, kept him under close watch. The investigation was ongoing, and Detective Grundle knew more work was needed to reveal the truth. On October 15, 2021, just as the case appeared to be at a standstill, a crucial piece of new evidence surfaced. On that cool, sunny afternoon, with clouds beginning to gather over Sedona, Detective Marla Grundle was at the station reviewing the case files when Officer Tom Jenkins rushed in, holding a sealed envelope. The envelope had been delivered anonymously earlier that morning, immediately raising suspicion. Inside the envelope was a USB drive containing startling evidence, a series of text messages between Gertrude Hartford Giles and an unidentified contact, dated just days before Juan's death. The messages revealed a detailed plan by Gertrude to divorce Juan and exclude him from her will, using her knowledge of Arlene Giles' illegal drug dealings as leverage. The texts expressed Gertrude's frustration with Juan's sullen attitude and lackluster performance, highlighting her growing impatience to rid herself of him, with one message bluntly stating, "Sex with him is so vanilla." One message read, "His bleep is smaller than my ring finger." Another chilling text stated, "If that bleep Arlene thinks she's getting away with this bleep, she's got another thing coming. I'll make sure she and that small bleep pay." Detective Grundle and her team quickly traced the origins of the messages and found that the anonymous contact was one of Gertrude's private investigators. This investigator had been hired by Gertrude to gather information on Arlene in the days leading up to her marriage to Juan. The investigator had uncovered Arlene's drug-dealing activities and was providing Gertrude with the information she needed to execute her plan. With this new evidence, the police intensified their focus on both Gertrude and Arlene. The investigation gained renewed urgency as it became evident that the truth was more intricate than initially suspected. The pieces were beginning to fit together, but the complete story remained elusive. On October 20th, 2021, the investigation reached a critical juncture. Detective Marla Grundle, after meticulously analyzing the text messages from the USB drive and cross-referencing them with phone records, uncovered a major breakthrough. It became clear that Arlene Giles, Juan's own mother, was behind the deadly plot. Driven by desperation and greed, Arlene had been using her son as a pawn in a scheme that ultimately led to his death. With sufficient evidence in hand, the police were ready to arrest Arlene Giles. Arlene, burdened by debt and a history of poor decisions, saw Juan's marriage to Gertrude as her escape from financial ruin. Driven by desperation, she manipulated her son into a deadly scheme, hoping it would provide her the solution she so desperately needed. Arlene was terrified that Juan, who was not known for having a sexual interest in women, might leave Gertrude, jeopardizing her financial stability. To prevent this, Arlene had been secretly giving Juan prescription drugs and sexual enhancers to keep him compliant and performing sexually. Tragically, her plan went awry when Juan accidentally overdosed, taking far more than she had intended. The case took a dramatic turn when it was revealed that Gertrude, frustrated with Juan's lack of sexual enthusiasm, had been planning to divorce him and cut both him and Arlene out of her life. Gertrude had discovered Arlene's drug dealings and intended to use that information to ensure they could no longer benefit from her wealth. In a desperate bid to keep the marriage intact, Arlene took matters into her own hands, leading to the tragic events that followed. On the night of Juan's death, Arlene administered a stronger dose of drugs to calm him, hoping to stabilize the situation. However, Juan, already distressed by his loveless marriage and fearful of Gertrude's cruelty, took even more pills on his own. This combination led to a fatal overdose. Although Arlene never intended to kill her son, her actions directly led to his tragic death. When the police confronted Arlene with the overwhelming evidence, she initially denied everything. Her panic and frantic demeanor contrasted sharply with her earlier calm. However, as Detective Grunwald presented the damning text messages and phone records, Arlene's defenses began to crumble. Arlene claimed she never meant to kill her son. Her only intention was to keep him in the marriage long enough to secure their financial future. Her arrest shocked both Sedona and Kenwood, leaving Juan's family devastated by the revelation that his own mother had played a crucial role in his tragic death. The community, already reeling from the strange circumstances of the marriage, now faced the painful truth that greed and desperation had resulted in such a tragic loss. As Arlene was escorted away in handcuffs, she seemed dazed, struggling to comprehend the full impact of her actions. The Giles family, engulfed in grief, expressed their deep sorrow and disbelief, finding it difficult to accept the harsh reality of what had transpired. The trial captivated the public and media alike, with the courtroom packed as Assistant District Attorney Mark Christensen laid out the prosecution's case against Arlene Giles. He presented evidence of her manipulative behavior and desperation, framing her actions as driven by greed and a disregard for her son's well-being. The emotional testimony and detailed evidence underscored the tragic consequences of Arlene's choices, making for a gripping and heart-wrenching trial. Public Defender Corita Vasquez argued that Arlene's actions, while tragic, stemmed from her overwhelming desperation and mental distress rather than a cold-blooded intent to kill. Vasquez portrayed Arlene as a deeply troubled woman who, despite her poor decisions, never intended to cause her son's death. She sought to elicit sympathy from the jury by emphasizing Arlene's emotional turmoil and the difficult circumstances that drove her to act recklessly. The defense aimed to mitigate the charges, suggesting that Arlene's actions were a result of her dire situation rather than premeditated malice. During the trial, public defender Querida Vasquez emphasized that Arlene's actions, though misguided and harmful, were driven by her desperate circumstances rather than a deliberate intention to kill. She argued that Arlene had been overwhelmed by financial strain and had made a catastrophic error in judgment under extreme pressure. Vasquez highlighted Arlene's remorse and the fact that Juan's death was an unintended consequence of her attempt to maintain the marriage for financial stability. She urged the jury to view Arlene's actions through the lens of her difficult life and to consider a more lenient sentence based on her emotional distress and lack of premeditation. On December 15, 2022, the jury delivered their verdict in a tense courtroom. Arlene Giles was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter. The jury concluded that while she had not intended to kill her son, her reckless and negligent behavior had directly led to his death. The verdict brought a mix of relief and sorrow to Juan's family, who were left grappling with the emotional aftermath of the trial. Arlene was sentenced to 20 years in prison, reflecting both the severity of her actions and the court's recognition of her underlying desperation. The trial concluded, but the impact of Juan's death and the choices made by those involved would continue to resonate through the community and the lives affected by the tragedy. Arlene Giles was convicted of involuntary manslaughter. The jury decided that although her actions caused Juan's death, there wasn't enough proof that she meant to kill him. The courtroom went quiet as the verdict was announced. Arlene stood motionless, her face pale and void of expression. The judge handed down a 10-year prison sentence, with the possibility of parole after 5 years. Reactions to the sentence were mixed. Some thought the sentence too lenient given the tragic loss of Juan's life, while others felt it was a fair reflection of Arlene's lack of intent to kill. Despite views that the sentence was just considering Arlene's desperate circumstances, it offered little solace to Juan's family. They were left to confront the painful reality that their loved one had been taken by the very person who should have cared for him. The town of Sedona also grappled with the unsettling events that had unfolded in their community, serving as a stark reminder of how greed and desperation can lead to tragic outcomes. In the months following Arlene Giles' sentencing, the case continued to affect the Sedona community deeply. The trial had left a lasting impression on everyone involved, from the Giles family to local residents. Arlene Giles was transferred to the Arizona State Prison Complex in Perryville, a high-security facility located near Phoenix. Inside the prison, she encountered a difficult situation. The extensive media coverage of her case made her a common topic of discussion and judgment among other inmates. The prison system provided Arlene with limited options for rehabilitation and support, compelling her to confront the devastating effects of her actions. She participated in programs focused on substance abuse and mental health, seeking some form of redemption and preparing for her eventual release. Meanwhile, life in Sedona slowly began to return to normal, though the impact of the case continued to resonate throughout the community. The town held a memorial for Juan at a local park, drawing friends, family, and residents who wanted to honor his memory. The event included live music and speeches celebrating Juan's life and dreams. It served as a poignant reminder of the young man whose life ended too soon and provided the community with an opportunity to support each other. A truthful crime case solvers. Interested in more real-life murder mysteries? Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. Do you have any thoughts about this case or have a case of your own you'd like us to investigate? Leave us a comment. Until then, stay safe.